Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. This is a virtual special meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 3 o'clock p.m. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start off with a roll call of the Commissioners. Commissioner Ed Chernowski.
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay. You're muted, maybe.
No, I'm not muted. I was just not talking very loudly. Can you hear me now?
You were just mouthing your name. Okay. Commissioner Richard Byrne.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Pat Caluzzi.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
I'm Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement. The mayor and commissioners, we are able to attain a quorum and formally conduct business today. Thank you all for being here. With that, I'd also like to recognize staff that helped make this meeting run. City Manager Sharon Lynn is here. City Attorney Glenn Mandalis is here. Also with me are Kevin Williams, the Public Works Supervisor, Chief Keith Banks of the Police Department, Howard Rothstein from Building and Licensing, and also Max Hamby from the IT department. Thank you. And Ann is downstairs there somewhere also. Thank you all for being here. With that, I'd like to welcome everybody that's watching today. And I'd especially like to thank the participants that registered ahead of time and are able to give input and feedback during the meeting. I will be calling on you at specified times during the meeting. With that, I want to remind everybody that this agenda, as do most agendas, includes support documents embedded into the agenda that are available when you go online to the legislative portal and seek the meeting date and seek the agenda. With that, I wanted to also thank Ann especially because she, in record time, loaded up the portal with the document center with a fantastic number of tree documents to help support this discussion and future discussions on trees. So thank you, Ann. Shout out to you. The purpose of this meeting is twofold. One is to receive an update on outside dining opportunities, including the status of outdoor dining applications, and including discussion on Main Street's proposal for traffic barrier options, including number one, option, use of decorative wrap on the barriers, and number two option, use of planters in place of standard traffic barriers. This particular topic is not intended to talk about post-pandemic outdoor dining procedures or path forward with that. As you recall, I articulated in an earlier meeting that that's on hold, still in development, and we will get that into the future as there is no super hurry to do that. And then the second item of business will be a continual review of 253 trees. So with that, I will.
What happened?
Carol Everhart of the Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce. We've got the president of Main Street, Greer Manival. We've got the executive director of Main Street, Dan Slagle. And two board members of Main Street, Jerry Philbin and Cindy Lovett. Welcome, and we'll call on you at appropriate times during the meeting. With that, I want to identify that I don't recall receiving any correspondence in time to be embedded in the agenda. And so we'll go right away to the first item of business, and I will let you know that these two topics were intended to be introductory topics. I don't know that we will get through them today, but I wanted to introduce both of them, and we can complete these tasks looking at goals, for instance, in the tree thing, and receiving the proposal of the new code today, and the future meetings we'll address toward the end of the meeting. With that, we'll go to an update on outside dining and turn it over to City Manager Sharon Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Commissioners. To update the outdoor dining spreadsheet that we sent out yesterday, because again, this is fluid, it is changing every day as we get more applications in. The deadline was March 1st, however, we're taking applications as they come in, so we're not, cutting anyone off. So from yesterday to today, we added, two, additional applications, but I think one has been withdrawn, so we're up to 41 applications received. I think, I can say that the applications are coming in, as best they can, and the staff is checking them, as best they can. We're actually going out and, meeting with, business owners, restaurant owners, and advising them what they can or cannot do. And I think for the most part, everything has been acceptable at this point. We've been working with the, restaurant owners and the retail shops, to make sure that they'll have their space. It looks like, many of them now, I'll turn it over to Howard in just a minute, but many of them now, either have, decided that, they are scaling back or they won't need to have outdoor dining, and the city has decided, city staff, that they won't need barricades. So, I think, we're doing a fine job in getting this out to the public. I'll turn it over to Howard Rothstein, who's been doing a great job as the code enforcement official in dealing with these applications, and Howard can tell you more about that.
All right. Good afternoon. So last year, there was 28 applications that were presented to the city. This year, out of the 28, only 14 came back that need barricades. So we had two that decided to withdraw. One of them, the sidewalks it wouldn't work. It would be very unsafe. And the other one decided to use a courtyard that is owned by the building owner. Right now, we have about 18 applications that are still, we're working with internal, because the alcohol board did change some of the rules. So every application, after reviewing it, I go back to the business owner, have them correct it, or we come to an agreement, because it has to be very serious for us to say that they can't do it. A couple from last year that they wouldn't do, between Kevin Williams and the chief, we decided that it was possible. So there were two from last year that was definite no's or yeses this year with barricades. So we're doing everything in our power to make it work for the business owner. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, great.
If there's, okay. Commissioner Srnowski?
Yes, I just, I want to thank Sharon and Howard and Kevin and the chief for all of their hard work. I've witnessed them go through this process, work with the businesses, some happy, some not, but at the end, what's best for the city and what's within the code that we've written. And I just want to thank them and congratulate them for a fantastic job.
Thank you. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, the same here. Just congratulations to the city staff for doing this, getting out ahead of the curve, having things in place and communication out there for our retailers and restaurants to know what is expected of them. Should be a very successful season, and I look forward to getting the rest of the 20 or 21 applications completed.
Thank you. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I'll echo the others in saying this is fantastic. I think it bodes well for the year. It's exciting. I know that there are one or two restaurants that the reason they're not coming back to ask now is because the restaurant's they've changed hands. But that means a new restaurant is going in. I'm thinking of at least one, and they may not be there yet. So I'm wondering if the opportunity will be open to to those who are not there yet, who are coming in the next month or two, but are not open yet? Would they have an opportunity as soon as they do open?
So, Commissioner, as I said, the cutoff date was March 1st. We're not holding to that. We were just trying to get a jump on where we are, so it wouldn't be such a labor-intensive process as we had last year. We're not going to turn anyone away.
Okay, so even if they came to you in May, you're open to it?
May 15th?
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'd be open to anyone coming in, yeah.
Because I know that there's some things in flux, that's why I asked. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We'll get to the public at the end of our conversation. Sharon, let's, if you want to introduce the Main Street folks, talk about their proposal.
Yeah, and I would also just like to add that, so the commissioners are aware and the public, we are not changing anything from last year. So if retail establishments wish to have their 3 feet of space, we will permit them to do that. And also as far as the horseshoe is concerned, we will have delivery options where meters will not be enforced for 1 hour. I think that was the situation, Chief.
Yeah, we started out at 1 hour, and I think it actually went down to 30 minutes. The more I think of it as the season went on, that we had that request for turnover.
Yeah, it did change.
I think it went from 30 minutes to an hour. I think we actually
Okay.
went up, not down.
Okay.
Well, whatever it was, we're going to keep everything the same.
That's great to hear.
Oh, okay. So, yes, thank you, Mayor. The Main Street organization has, early on, has fundraised. They were requesting their contributors to put in some money for the barriers to ease the stress on the businesses. And I think that at least it was reported to me that they were successful in doing this, perhaps even receiving some grant funds. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Chanowski to expand on that.
Thank you, Sharon. Max, are you able to pull the document that I sent to you and Ann up, or?
Yes, give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you. Okay. First, I just want to start off by thanking, on behalf of Main Street, thanking the city for its partnership. Without the support and partnership of the city, we really wouldn't be able to go out and have these types of projects where we've got volunteers that are able to do grant writing and our fundraising efforts. So the partnership between Main Street and the city is one that we appreciate very much and we acknowledge, and it's to the benefit of our community overall. So first and foremost, just want to thank the city and the mayor and all of the commissioners for that support and partnership. Very simply, last year we used the orange barriers. We scaled it back to be more business specific last year as we started to take some of the barriers up, as we realized it wasn't needed as widespread as we initially thought. This year, Howard is doing even a better job keeping the barriers that the businesses require for pedestrian walkways even more specific and narrowed in scope. So Main Street, through our fundraising efforts and grant writing, has money to help defray some of the costs that's been put on the businesses through our choice. We as a city are also contributing quite a bit in what would have been revenue in those parking spots. So there's some shared expense here, and Main Street is happy to help both the city and the businesses in that. Um, so in looking at it from an inviting and beautification effort for the city, our recommendation is to add some of the earth planters that we already use in the city, that you can see on the screen here. On the left hand side is a picture of some of the barrier pedestrian walkway that was used last year. On the right side, the earth planters that we propose we use this year in addition to the barriers. And simply we ask that we just insert some of the planters abutting barriers on either side, just to give it a little break and make it look a little bit nicer. So that is our recommendation, to utilize the orange jersey barriers in all locations as the city has planned. To make the city of Rehoboth Beach more inviting and aesthetically pleasing, we propose the inclusion of earth planters that would be interspersed among the jersey barriers. With keeping in mind that the corner of the pedestrian barriers as it turns for walkways around certain businesses, those corners that are facing incoming traffic would remain to be the heavier jersey barriers. Any earth planters would be placed, if you're looking on that left-hand side there, on the picture of a row of barriers. Envision that planter just being interspersed in between a straight line like that, just to break up the look. And ultimately, the chief and director of public works would have complete discretion and able to make any changes on the ultimate placement of the planters. And then once the planters are placed, Rehoboth Beach Main Street and Rehoboth and Bloom will maintain the planters once they are placed. At the bottom there, I've provided the specifications for the planters. In total, they are once they're filled with the soil, plants, and water, they're about 100 or 312 pounds in weight. After speaking with the chief and the director of public works, they feel like that's a pretty significant amount of weight and safety protection, but I'll let them speak more to it if there's questions on that front. Max, if we could go to the next page. So this is a breakdown on the financial assistance that Main Street is able to provide. So far, Main Street has raised just over $32,000 in direct fundraising efforts and successful grant submissions. So what I did was take a look at currently, and that's the list that we got from Howard just I think yesterday or the day before. There are 11 locations that would have barriers, with 94 barriers in total, and renting them, what we've asked the businesses to rent at $25 a month, and I averaged or guessed 5 months that they would be utilized once we actually get them out and take them. That could vary a little bit, but that would be $11,750. And I just added a potential increase of that number, just in case more are submitted and are approved by the city. So I bumped that up to 15 locations, took the average of barriers per location, which would be 128 barriers. At the same math, that takes us to a rental cost of about $16,023 or $23. So that would just be the rental of the barriers that Rehoboth Beach Main Street would like to pay to defray the cost from the businesses. In addition to adding planters in the mix to make it look nicer for both the businesses and the visitors alike, we're suggesting that we would buy 30 to 40 planters to be placed in between the jersey barriers. That would be approximately 2 to 3 per cluster of barriers at the different locations, whether it's 11 or 15 or somewhere in between. The cost of the planters would be somewhere between $12,000 and $18,000. let me tell you what the variance is there. On the low end, we're taking the 30 planters. On the high end, we're taking 40. But also, we're taking the retail price and looking at our we would expect that we're going to get some cost savings on buying bulk, so that it's going to lower the cost. Not confirmed yet, so I gave a range there. My guess is, or my prediction is, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. We probably use 35 planters, and it would be closer to $15,000. So once the planters are purchased, it would become an asset of the city. Let me explain that. Because a good portion of the money that was received, it was a grant from Delaware that we were able to obtain. And part of that, just normal course, Main Street would have to pay the city directly for these efforts. So the city would end up being the ones to purchase the planters, and that would become an asset of the city. At the once we're done using them for this specific effort, the city can keep them and place them someplace else, and perhaps have Rehoboth Beach, Main Street, and Rehoboth and Bloom service them once they're placed someplace. Liz could use them in the Parks Department somehow. The city could sell them and make money off of them, or they could be donated back to Rehoboth and Bloom and go into whatever their plans are for the future. So there's some options there. So that is the recommendation. And I'll ask if Dan or Greer or any of the board members, I want to first thank Dan, Cindy, Greer, and Jerry. You know, Main Street is a very different than a lot of other organizations. We are a grassroots, hands-on organization, and the amount of volunteer time and efforts that go into things like this is tremendous. So I want to thank them, and then offer an opportunity for any of them to if I missed anything or if they've got other things to add, and then we'll take questions from the commissioners and mayor.
Thank you, Ed. Let me just go down the list since we have to push a button here. Dan, do you want to start off with anything?
Pretty much, Ed, everything I needed to say. So thank you, Ed. And thank you, Commissioner, Mayor.
Thank you, Dan. Greer, do you want to say anything?
Again, I agree with Dan. I think we've covered a lot of it. I just appreciate the time that you've given us today, Mayor and Commissioners, for listening to our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the brevity. Jerry Philbin?
Thank you, Mayor Mills. Same. I think Edward has covered it very well, and we would look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Cindy?
I think the only thing I wanted to say is I heard from many people that if you could figure out a way to make the barrier situation look better, everybody would appreciate that. And this is one of the reasons we went on this direction.
Very good. Thank you, Cindy. With that, we'll go back to the commissioners. Commissioner Calusi?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to start off by saying this was a tremendous effort, and you all should be congratulated, Commissioner Trzaskowski and the board of Main Street. I'm very impressed with what you've done, and I'm sure the businesses are going to be very happy as well. I think it's a great plan. If we can get the wrap on the barriers as well, I think it could end up making it look very attractive, much better than last year. And to me, as far as the city owning these or donating them back to Main Street, they should be used in this city because they will beautify our downtown, and I am very much looking forward to seeing them. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Calusi, you introduced a new topic that most watchers won't understand. You said something about wrap. barriers. Ed, do you want to explain real quick, that there was an original intention that's changed?
Yeah. Let me touch on that a little bit. So like I said, we've spent a lot of time looking at different options to just make them look nicer. And one of the options was adding a car wrap type thing around the barriers, or putting a vinyl sticker on one side with a beachscape image or something like that. Um, After looking at it and investigating it more and looking at the cost, it was just cost prohibitive for something that is being attached to something that we don't even own. It may
yeah.
not last long. And at the end of the day, we just felt like it was a waste and it was cost prohibitive. So
Well-
we've decided that inserting planters was the best option.
I think you're right. That's a great option. So if these aren't something that we own, I was going to suggest you could definitely get volunteers from or artists from the Rehoboth Art League who might paint them. That could be a really interesting idea, but if they don't belong to us, that's probably not an option unless the people who have them would be interested in having them painted.
Yeah, I doubt that Suburban Propane are going to want their barriers painted on. But in research, there are a lot of communities that have the concrete barriers that do have them painted. But yeah, it's not an option for us here, I don't think.
Okay, well, thank you. Good work.
Thank you both. Commissioner Byrne?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I want to add my positive comments also and thank Commissioner Szyrzanowski and our friends at Main Street for working hard at this, for being creative, for putting the time and energy into raising the dollars. I think this is exactly what we need. We need to do all that we can, one, to support our businesses, and therefore raising the money and putting the $16,000 or whatever the amount is toward the cost of the barriers, and then dressing up our streets. And there's no finer way to do it than with safe planters that will be taken care of by Rehoboth and Bloom. I'm one of those many volunteers in Rehoboth and Bloom, and I know both the fact that these barriers do weigh over 300 pounds, because I've been one of those people that push them around, move them around, put the dirt in, take the dirt out, and do all of those things. And these barriers, and Cindy can describe it in great detail, but the science to it is that the planters rather hold many gallons of water below the soil. And so there's a wicking system that is perpetually in use around the clock. So it's not the kind of maintenance where you need daily kind of watering and so on, because they are self-watering. So while it does take, weekly maintenance and weekly work, they are fantastic. And for those of you that have paid attention to the planters around town, we have received, and Cindy Lovett's credit, the Rehoboth in Bloom team deserves a lot of accolades for helping our city look better. And what a great way to do this, to put some of them on the street. They provide safety and they provide the beauty that we need. So we get away from a construction zone look around our outdoor dining. Thank you, Main
Thank you, Dick. I'd like to go to Sharon and the chief. Would you like to comment on anything? Are you satisfied with this program, or any comments?
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, general public. The Commissioner did give me a spec sheet, and I did review it and even discussed with DelDOT in past year. I will start off by saying, as a reminder, that on Rehoboth Avenue, the first 2 blocks of the avenue is maintained and under the operation of the city of Rehoboth Beach. So we kind of stay out of it. As I said last year too, DelDOT, they got certain regulations, but during this COVID, they are trying to work with the downtown businesses and each town. So really, as long as the mayor and commissioners are okay with it, that's the first part of approval to then it's fine. So the one thing we look at is to make sure it's substantial, that it's weighted, which this will be. It's going to be, it's a type of material that's not going to splinter off. That's the next thing. If a car did hit it, if it was a traffic accident, that's not going to splinter and hit a pedestrian sitting there. So overall, just looking at all the components in the spec sheets, as far as the police department, we're okay with it.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners? I will add, just FYI, Commissioner Sernowski, your sheet there is very helpful. It does mention that you're doing an estimate for 5 months. I'd like to remind everybody that the maximum this year most likely would be 7 months, the month of April, May, June, July, August, September, October, ending November 1st to mimic this year's program. But as you recall, I mentioned that, this is a program for during the state of emergency. However, when we find out when the emergency is going to end, we would have a meeting to talk about the transition from emergency to non-emergency times, with my preference to allow it to go until November 1st, so that there's no abrupt change in there. So that's just one change. Anybody else? Commissioner Gay, please.
Yeah, I'm really glad to know about this. It actually answers a lot of questions that I had when I first saw the notice about raising the money, because it seemed to me at the time, and as recently as last night when I looked at the list of the applicants and I counted the 94 barriers as you did, and it came up with a cost even at 7 months of $16,000. And I because I thought all along this goal of 30,000 was way too much. And I was going to ask you, what you would do with donations, if you couldn't use it all. And so obviously, and I, in a way, I think, I think going forward, the project needs to be pitched really for what it is, which is a beautification project. It's not for the barriers. The barriers are a small part of it. It's really for beautification and to add to all of the beauty that the Rehoboth and Broome project has brought to the city as a whole, and the fact that we will continue to own them, and therefore continue the whole beautification. So I think the message that was sent out initially sort of implied poverty in a way. I mean, it implied that, well, the city's not going to pay for them and somebody's got to pay for them, when really that's not what it's about. It's about it's a very positive message, to beautify the situation, the street during this time. And I guess the other thing I noticed was that in the materials that went out, it did say that preference would be given to member restaurants. And I am somewhat concerned that, since we are the major funding source, not of this project, but of Main Street, I don't know how that works when public funds support a private organization to support their members, whether it should be equally available to anyone in the city, any restaurant in the city, not just members. How do we deal with that?
Well, I'll answer, I guess, a couple questions you had and the mayor had. One, Mayor, I used 5 months as just a general estimate. Because some businesses aren't going to open up until May, some are going to close early. I wasn't sure that we'd even be ready to have everything in place by April 1. So it was a general estimate. Commissioner Gay, so you're right that this is a beautification effort, and almost everything that Main Street does, we try to turn it into that. And I will say that we were pleasantly surprised that we had such generous donations and were able to receive a grant, because I can tell you the grant writing process is very frustrating. You write 100 of them and then you finally get one, and it's a great feeling. So we definitely raised much more than we expected. And we're able to turn this into something bigger and larger and even more beautiful than we originally anticipated. When we originally were talking the executive committee, we were unsure how much funds we were going to have, how wide it would be able to stretch. And we did discuss whether it should be, open to everyone or preference should be given to the members. But our goal the entire time was to raise enough for it to cover everything for everyone. So we're glad that it did, and we have those funds to pay for everything. And you do make a good point on, and everything Main Street does is for the betterment of the entire community. However, because we are constantly trying to raise funds from other sources, and right now the city is a little less than half of our funding source. So we do have the buy-in from the business community, our residential community, and other organizations that donate. This is something that as we grow, we need to discuss as a board and have something in place. There needs to be some perk for our business members that have invested in Main Street, just like the city has invested. But that does not say that we, for example, throughout this entire pandemic, we did an outdoor dining guide. We didn't do it just for our members. We did it for everyone.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
We went through a lot of effort in getting safety kits for businesses and hand sanitizer. We didn't limit it just to our business members. It was open to everyone. And just like this, our intention was to open it to everyone. But so we're lucky enough that we've raised enough that it is for everyone, and we don't even need to think about or discuss if it needs to be scaled back. But in this instance, the board has made a decision that it is for everyone, and should we not have enough at the end of the day, we'll scale back how many planters are used to make it cover everything. But at the end of the day, if we had to scale it back even further, we would just prorate it so everyone's getting equal treatment on reimbursement or payment for it. But you bring up a good point that as an organization will kind of be a priority for us to determine when and where and how our members have different opportunities than the general businesses. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
it is something that we're being thoughtful about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad of that, because I've never really known what the answer was there. But I'm also just, the bottom line here is that everybody's going to benefit from this because you have enough funds and it matches up with the number of businesses that want them. I would just say it looks like more than half the cost is going to go toward the planters, and that's a positive thing as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Gag. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, first off, congratulations on the fundraising, the grant applications. I know from personal experience, they can be rather daunting and on the edge of your seat waiting for responses. So I wish you luck in future grant applications also. And I'm just curious with Rehoboth and Bloom, they're doing an incredible job. So this is at least doubling their responsibilities, I guess. And I just hope that Cindy, you're able to keep your volunteers in line or showing up or getting more volunteers, whatever is needed, because that is a huge responsibility. And I appreciate the time and effort and energy that you and all your team put into that beautifying downtown. And one final question, City Manager Lynn, have we been able to determine a rental price for the barriers and the availability of the barriers?
Yes, we have rented an additional 100 barriers. 150, we own 50. And the cost?
25, I think.
25 a piece?
A month, yes.
Thereabouts. 20 a piece.
Yeah,
plus,
20,
25
and I think
charge. Prorated is right around 20.
Okay, 25, yes.
Per month?
Correct.
Okay.
Per
Thank
barrier.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Legree? You're muted.
Good, good job, everybody. Shout out to Cindy. I love Rehoboth and Bloom, and you guys are just doing a wonderful job. And keep it up. Looking good.
Very good. I'd like to go to the members of the public. Carol Everhart, are you on board? Nope. She didn't sign in. So with that, I want to thank you all. Thank you, Ed, for your presentation, and for all the other Main Street participants. Thank you for being here. I think it's a great program. It's exciting. I can't wait for summer to get here. With that, we're going to close this topic and go to the next topic, which is.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I think we do need. I think because this stuff needs to be ordered and planned, we do need some sort of nod or go ahead. And I don't know if it's from the city manager or us, but I think we need some approval of this, whether it's formal or informal.
Well, unless there's objections from the commissioners, I've heard overwhelming support, and I would suggest that city manager just works with Main Street and proceeds with the program as noted. Anybody object to that? Hearing no objections, we'll authorize the city manager to work with Main Street on this. Good job, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
All righty. So we'll move on to the next item of business, which is continue a review of Chapter 253 trees, and you can read in the agenda all the additions to the language there. This is tree meeting number 2. If you recall, last time was more of an organizational meeting to organize documents and manage how we're going to go forward. So this is meeting 2, which is actually the introduction to the tree code. Today has 2 goals for me. One is to discuss and further define desired goals of a successful tree code, including review of goals established for the current code, goals articulated by the Planning Commission, and goals articulated by the Law Oversight Committee. I believe that the very first step and the priority for us as the mayor and commissioners is to identify the goals of a successful tree plan so that we know how to evaluate the different proposals in front of us, so that the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, the Environment Committee, the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee all have goals in front of them, know what our goals are, so that they can then further analyze the code with respect to our goals. I don't know that we'll get through it today, but I'd like to introduce that. I wanted to thank Susan Gay for compiling a set of objectives, so she'll take the lead in a minute. I also want to remind everybody that Susan is our liaison, that if you have any questions or notes or new documents to add on there, go through Susan. She's got a full grasp of everything that we're doing here. And she acts like secretary taking notes on this. My goal, Susan, would be that at some point, not necessarily today, but at least by the next meeting, we have a new set of bulleted goals and objectives for a tree code that can merely mirror what we've had before, or we can add new dimensions to it. After that conversation, we have the chair of the Law Oversight Committee here, and I've asked him to really have carte blanche to hand over the proposal for a new Chapter 253, Trees and Landscaping, and any memos. And a reminder again that in the legislative portal online, you'll find all these documents that we refer to today, as well as a whole load of other ones. So with that, let's start off with Susan. Do you want to take the lead in discussing objectives?
Yeah, I just want to give sort of an overview. I'm not going to read the document because it's attached to the agenda, but I'm going to sort of weave some other things into it and sort of how it came together. But before I do that, let me say, I don't see Hoyt on. Is he going to be with us today? Because I thought he was going to then take it to talk about the specifics of how the Law Oversight Committee went about their task. If that doesn't happen, I guess it's okay, because some of the objectives are in this document, but I expected that, so I don't see him. Anyway, Okay, so and as I said, I've tried to pull together basically the goals of the existing tree ordinance, the revision that the Planning Commission had done in 2014, and the current one on the table that the Law Oversight Committee had done. So, but I want to, as I said, I want to give some sort of weave it together because I think there are not only some common themes here, but there are also some opportunities I think we have that perhaps didn't exist the last time that a revision was proposed. At the very top of the new Law Oversight Committee draft ordinance, it does say the stated purpose, which is to preserve, protect, and maintain our unique wooded seaside character of the city by preserving its high tree canopy and native species. And I'll also note, as the mayor said a minute ago, it does include the word landscape as a new part of the ordinance. Landscape was not part of it before. There's really nothing much in it to do with landscape. We may have some opportunities there. It talks about general maintenance, but there's really not a lot on landscape. However, it purports to be broader than just trees. The current ordinance actually is the one we're all familiar with, is the one that was adopted in 2006. But I learned in the process of putting these documents together, and I also want to reiterate what the mayor said earlier, that Ann did an amazing job assembling all this and actually finding things that I didn't even know existed. So I think we've got a rich set of documents in the portal right now. And one of the things I discovered that I did not know about was the very first tree ordinance, which was actually done in 1988. And it's very brief. It's only about 4 pages. It is all about public trees. There are only 2 definitions in the entire code: street tree and park tree. That's it. That is the ordinance that created the Parks and Shade Tree Commission. In fact, the wording that's in the ordinance, our current ordinance, comes from that original one from '88. And among the tasks that they were supposed to do was to develop a comprehensive city tree plan, which they would update annually. And of course, that is in practice never happened. And I believe that has gone away in the Law Oversight Committee's new draft because it's never happened. And now we have an arborist who's going to be doing those things. In addition to that, there are rules for planting trees in the city and public tree care of all types, how far it can be from corners, everything about public tree care in the city. But it's only about that. The 2004 CDP was really the start of the revision process of that and the need for a tree ordinance that addressed trees on private property as well as public property. And it was specifically called out in the 2004 CDP, and it led to the first ordinance in 2006. And at the same time that it came out of the CDP, but it was also done at the same time that other code changes were made to allow for the tree ordinance to be updated and to be consistent with what was called for in the tree ordinance. And that was zoning changes such as the FAR, the change in the FAR, and the increase in setbacks to allow. So it wasn't just the tree ordinance, there were other code changes, and that'll be an important theme going forward too. However, despite that, there have been over the years still a continuous loss of trees on private property despite that ordinance. In 2010, the Davy Tree Report did conclude that the greatest opportunity to increase the canopy was on public land, specifically street trees. When the Planning Commission, in 2011, there was a resolution to increase the canopy, a specific goal to increase the canopy of the city because it was seen as going in the other direction. And the Planning Commission was tasked with rewriting the ordinance, which they started doing in 2012. They concluded with a report that was delivered in the summer of 2014 that is not just a draft ordinance, and that draft ordinance was frankly never considered, never really discussed, but it also came with a report of recommendations to go over and above the ordinance, because they concluded that in addition to amending the tree ordinance, far more action is required. On private property, the themes were right tree, right place, and some changes in what we would require for construction techniques, because that's one of the things that had been particularly harmful to trees. And on public property, the need for more street trees, the need for bump outs, the need to incorporate trees into street design. And the Planning Commission's report harkens back to the city goal, and the city goal for decades, which is to preserve, protect, and maintain the unique wooded seaside character. And they concluded that the city's goal, that goal is heavily dependent upon the city taking action as well. In other words, not just on private property, but on public property. So I feel like, and of course, reading their report from 2014 and seeing that they talked about bump outs and including it in street designs, today very well. There's a great opportunity here for convergence, because the timing, and I didn't actually know some of this stuff. I certainly wasn't thinking about it when we broadened the name of the Mayor's Advisory on Trees to include green infrastructure. But that's where we are today, because we can't plant probably as many canopy trees as there used to be. And just by the way, I have some sobering data that Tony Sharp actually presented when she did a report on green infrastructure in 2019, and that is, and the data is a little bit old in that it's only current as of 2018, but from 2016 to 18, so 3 years worth of data, on private property, 886 trees were removed, and only 387 new were planted. On average, 24 trees were removed each and every month during those 3 years. The good news was that on public property, and I only have 2 years data for that, 2016 and 17, 110 trees were planted in those 2 years. So, and 2.6 trees were planted on public property for every 1 tree that was removed. So we had a 260% replacement, only 44% replacement on private. So that was a good thing, but it also shows just how much we are losing on private property. And I went back today to get that data out of the slideshow that she and I had put together for that day. And I was reminded of a quote from an urban planner that it's at the very end of the presentation that says, "Economic development in the absence of environmental integrity is not sustainable." And I think we're very clearly in a mode here of development in the city. A lot of development everywhere. And as I said, it's a great time, it's a great convergence of recognizing that green infrastructure, recognizing the city's role, recognizing that our stormwater management is putting in the right ordinances, the right techniques, the right plans, and potentially even the right incentives, because going back to the fact that every other tree ordinance involved other code changes, I believe this one does as well. It's not to say that they would be part of the tree code, but there will be other changes elsewhere in the code, as well as possible other policy changes that I would like to see us develop in concert with doing the tree ordinance, so that it all goes together seamlessly, because we're at the perfect time to do that. So
thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Gay, for compiling this document. Again, it's not embedded in the agenda, but there's a link in the agenda. Some of these documents are too many and too large to embed in the agenda, so we're taking it over to the document center where you can then access others. So thank you for your work on this. Again, I believe our goal should be to re-articulate or develop new goals for the tree code, so that we have a foundation as we analyze the new proposed code and compare it to the existing code. Does anybody have any comments? Commissioner Legree.
you're muted.
Jay, you're muted.
That's my middle name, Jay muted. On the data that you and Tony, that you put together, I can remember many, many private lots that were just slicked of trees in those 2 years. Did you count those trees too?
Yeah, this information came from Liz. In fact, she's going to update it for us at some point. But yeah, that's where it came from. Why? You think it's even more than that?
I wondered if you had managed to count all. I mean, It's
Yeah,
just,
I have to ask
it's
her. I
so
don't,
frustrating when
yeah,
I walk by these locations and suddenly see them slicked and there's a few tall trees around the periphery. And it's just frustrating. Thank you very much for the data, and thanks for getting us going. And thanks, Mayor, for doing this.
Thank you. Well, with no further comment, Susan, I hate to put the burden on you, but could you work with me perhaps and try to re-articulate what some goals are by taking them out of the different documents and re-bulleting them?
well, you know, what I could do is go through the ones that are on, that are in the document that actually are the most recent ones, the Law Oversight Committee revision objectives that they stated at the beginning of their process. I could do that next if you wanted to.
Well, I'd like to have something in front of the commissioners that they can
It's
nod their head
it is
on.
attached. It's a support document. It's not just in the portal. It's this particular is a support document. I mean, I don't have it on screen, but it's a support. It's attached to the agenda for today.
Well, it's a link to the legislative document portal.
No, it's a support document. Because I have it up on my screen.
Either way, it's accessible.
Right.
All righty, very good. Well, thank you very much. I thought we would delve into it a little deeper and try to reaffirm the objectives and goals. We'll see if we can come up with a paper and look at it next time, and maybe we at least reaffirm the objectives within the current code or something. Maybe they
Well,
stand.
do you want to go down through the most recent objectives, or do you want to talk about the process for how we go forward from here? Because I had thought as I was preparing for today what I would want to do next.
Well, you can share that. Commissioner Gossett, did you have something you want to say? And then I'll come back to you, Commissioner Gay.
Great.
Yeah, I just a comment. You know, I was part of that Planning Commission rewrite of the tree code. And it is very important for us to realize going forward that this does go hand in glove with other aspects of our code, natural area, even the standpoint of thinking about parking. If we're requiring 2 parking spaces in every for every lot, for every new home constructed, you know, that's less room for trees. Looking at the ability to plant trees closer to the lot line, so you're not thinking about a line tree when you're considering what's available or what is to be counted in your tree area. And to be honest with you, you also have to look at the green space that we have in some of our parks, that if we keep planting in the parks, which I'm not opposed to, but you also then lose the vistas, the area, the grass, the ability for, you know, throw a frisbee and walk around and walk your dogs and what have you. So it is a balance, and you have to consider many aspects of this when we're looking at the plan holistically. It's not just about trees in that regard. And I think that to look at it, to take the time to kind of introduce yourself again to other parts of the code that this really has an impact on is very important about this process going forward. Thanks.
Well, if you remember in our organizational meeting, we mentioned that likely meeting number 3 or somewhere in there, we would be taking a pause to allow the committees to do some homework, and during that pause that we would take a look at other codes that might impact trees and see if they need amending as well. So that is on the horizon. Commissioner Gay, you wanted to go ahead and give your thoughts on how to proceed?
Well, one of the things I had wanted to do was you know, obviously get the feedback from the current Parks and Shade Tree, since there have been new people there. And I am going to be discussing it, mostly the goals and objectives part, but discussing it with our Tree and Green Infrastructure Committee on Friday and hear back from, you know, Dick's Environment Committee, that kind of thing. But in addition to that, I have gotten a number of comments from people based on, you know, when Hoyt first sent the ordinance in, he sent it out to anybody who had ever been or contributed or sent a letter or anything to any of their meetings. So a lot of people got it and responded to it. And I feel like, and several of them have sort of come back to me recently to ask what we're doing with it. I almost feel like I should try to take the component parts and not only compare the newest version, the oversight version, with the planning commission's version, just to sort of remind myself what is different about it, but to also incorporate people's reactions, so that when we get down into the nitty gritty, we're not just looking at support documents, but we're actually taking an issue and seeing, what the various input from these different stakeholders is. And I think that's important. And the Planning Commission back in 2014 spent a lot of time, and their recommendations are great. And I would love to see us meet all of the goals in that report. I think it's a big regret that we never did that. And interestingly, the one of the primary authors of that report is now back on the Planning Commission, Brian Patterson, and I would love to talk to him about it. And the chair of the Planning Commission used to be on our Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees and is very tree oriented, Jeff Trunzo. And I haven't spoken to either of them because, frankly, I thought they were a little busy right now. But I am planning to do that. I would like to do that. I think their input would be important, both of them. So, I have to assume and I have to hope that trees will play a big part in the CDP that's in the works now, just as it has for the last 2 CDPs. So I just think a lot of information needs to come together, and at the same time, we need to put it together in a way that makes it digestible, and so that we can get on with discussing the specifics, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to the next item of business, which is to let the Law Oversight Committee hand over their documents. I gave Hoyt Decker carte blanche to come here and say as much or as little as he wants. Unfortunately, he's not able to get on, and so our meeting will be a little abbreviated, if you don't mind. But what I would like to do is read the support documents that are available online in the document portal under trees, specifically under proposed new code by the Law Oversight Committee. They've got a version 1 of a comprehensive tree and landscape ordinance dated March 20. They've also got a version 2 dated March 20, so I'm not quite sure what the difference is there. He's got 2 memos, one of July 6th, that's very well written and would suffice to give you great background on how they derived what they presented to the commissioners. And then a memo of August 19th, which is a follow-up report. Again, very well written. They'll give you a lot of insight. And then he does have a 5th support document that is a compilation of citizen responses to the tree code when it was originally made public, I think back in March or April a year ago. So we've got all those documents there to read up on. There's certainly a lot of homework to do, but I think this is a good start. Would like to go to the members of the public, if you don't mind, and see if they have any input they would like to give us. Is Carol on? Carol's not on. How about Greer, Jerry, Cindy, Dan?
I don't think anybody's on.
That's all. Everybody's smart's gone home already. I'd like to open it up to the commissioners. Is there anything in particular you would like to see? I think next time, I guess Susan and I will work on the agenda for next. Maybe we should take a break and go in 2 weeks. Give your thought. Although if we're gonna finalize objectives, it should be done sooner than later so that the committees are able to use that as a foundation for their discussion. So let's have it next week. I'll get out an agenda today. We'll continue with this, both these topics actually at the next meeting. And then if there's time, get into discussion of any additional amendments to other codes that impact. Commissioner Jay, Legree, did you have a comment? Unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, one of the things that happens when you take on a project like this, sometimes you don't know what your objectives will be until you collect data. And today, I was surprised that the weight of the loss of trees is on private property. I that, but I didn't think it would be so acute. And do we know anyone who's an expert in canopy trees? That's a whole different science than a regular arborist or someone who's a generalist. There are really some different ideas when you're trying to build canopies as opposed to just putting trees around the periphery of your property or making shade and things like that, because canopy trees live a whole different life. And I really think that we need to take a look at some of that. And I bet we have people around who can give us some ideas and that as we go forward. But I agree with Susan. We just need to formulate where we want to go, collect our data, see where our problems are, and set some objectives that way. And this is a great start. And I thank you for all that you've done. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to interject before we get to the rest of the commissioners that I am unable to get out an agenda today, so we will not have the meeting next Tuesday. It will be on the 23rd. Okay, Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a very brief comment. I think it's critical that we do establish these goals and objectives early on, and that's not to take away at all from what Commissioner Legree said, because I think that we do need to be informed all the way along this path by the data and the information that we collect, and then be flexible therein. But it occurs to me that just having good intentions, like all of these groups in the past have had, clearly are not enough. And you go through the history here that Commissioner Gay compiled for us, and it's very helpful, Susan, thank you. And for example, under number 2, toward the bottom of the second page, in lines 87 through 89, the Planning Commission determined that the current ordinance was complex, difficult to understand, inconsistent, et cetera, and yet here, under the best of intentions, over many years, people had worked hard to put together a code that they thought would really make good sense and would really achieve these outcomes, these big goals. And yet, then we've got the data that shows us how many trees we have lost. So we can have all of that and still be losing trees and not achieving, the bigger picture goals. So it's just interesting to me. And I think that we need to be careful as we go along, that it's practical enough for everyone, for the homeowner and everyone, the developer and us in the public sector, that we do achieve the goals that we want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Legree?
I agree with everything Dick said. I did that very thing. Immediately after hearing the information, my goals shifted a little bit, and that's good. You make goals as you go along. Every time you find some new piece of information, you shift your goals, and that's the way it's done. That's the way theories are formulated in science. Yeah. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Let me just add to that when I was given this little history, I realized, okay, because the tree ordinance started in the 80s with public property. It then became all about private property in the ordinance, both in 06 and in the rewrites. And I think whatever we do going forward should be both. I mean, I think we really have to look at it globally, comprehensively. It's the only way. I don't think the goals of preserving, protecting, and maintaining will ever be met. And maybe that's why it's taken this long to get a revision, because it's an impossible task if you don't consider all of it together.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Susan, I appreciate you working on this and what you've done, and working with me in the future to develop upcoming agendas. As I mentioned, the next special meeting on trees specifically will be on Tuesday, March 16th at 3 o'clock.
thought you
And
said
with that, if there's no other
You just-
questions,
I thought you said it was.
Mayor, you just said the 23rd.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let me, 23, 2, 3.
Okay.
Got it.
That's 2 weeks from today. Thank you for the correction. With that, this meeting is adjourned.